Good evening and welcome to NineNorth's Compass programs. Throughout 2021, NineNorth has been hosting community conversations on timely and difficult subjects that impact our community and that have been magnified during the pandemic. My name is Grace Lee. I am the Vice Chair of the City of Roseville's Human Rights, Inclusion, and Engagement Commission. I'd like to recognize Youth Commissioner Beverly Shia for coming up with the idea to host this panel discussion, Chair Etienne Javi for connecting us with NineNorth, and of course, thank you to NineNorth for partnering with us to host today's Compass program on anti-Asian hate and ending violence towards the Asian American community. According to CBS News, a new study based on police department statistics across major US cities found a nearly 150% surge in anti-Asian hate crimes in 2020, while overall hate crimes fell by 7%. The numbers are limited to crimes reported to local police departments, so the actual numbers are likely even larger. Nonetheless, the numbers do reflect a growing trend of discrimination against Asian Americans during the coronavirus pandemic. People of Asian descent have been physically and verbally assaulted, including being pushed, beaten, kicked, spat on, set on fire, and called racial slurs. Homes and businesses have also been vandalized. A recent study by the group Stop AAPI Hate shows that women are attacked almost 2.5 times more than men, and the violence has known no boundaries, spanning all ages from school children to the elderly, in fact, often targeting the elderly. According to the US Census Bureau, the city of Roseville's largest non-white racial group are Asians at 9%, followed by Black or African Americans at 8%, 5% multiracial, and 4% Latino. So, is this anti-Asian hate really happening in our community here in Minnesota and the city of Roseville? And what can we do about it? So today we will be speaking to a panel of Asian American community members to hear their experience and insight. Our panelists include Huyen-Vy Nguyen, and she goes by Vivi for short. She's a small business owner of Teacup located off of Lexington Avenue near Larpenteur in Roseville. We also have with us Dr. Rose Chu from the Board of Directors of Roseville Area Public Schools, as well as Kuge Pen, Youth Career Development Counselor at the Kren Organization of Minnesota, which is located off of Rice Street near County Road B2 in Roseville. Thank you all for joining us today. And I'd just like to start by giving each panelist an opportunity to tell more about themselves and maybe why they felt it was important to join with us today. So we will start with Vivi. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. As Grace mentioned, I am Huyen-Vy Nguyen. I go by Vivi for short. My little family consists of my husband, Tuan, and our 2 little kids. Our kids go attend the Parkview Center School, so we're very familiar with the area. Tuan works as a medical device specialist in Maple Grove. I, on the side, do beverage consulting. We came up with the idea of having Teacup in Roseville a few years ago, and we made that dream a reality, which is kind of cool. Through our Teacup, store location, we got to meet a ton of people from the Roseville community, and we love our little city. We couldn't have asked to live in a better place. This is probably one of the best cities to live in so far. And I joined this panel tonight because my personal belief is that there is anti-Asian sentiments going around our country and our community. I mean, there's no discussion about that. But my belief states that awareness have to start before changes can be made. And we have to acknowledge that there is that problem. So this is why I'm joining today, because I want to speak and discuss and talk about my personal feelings and what I've gone through, experiences, to why I think this is an issue.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Rose Chu from the Board of Directors of Roseville Area Schools.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm a longtime educator. So the Roseville Area School Board position is something that is really it's a professional growth for me to look at kind of education from another angle, from the governance and policy angle. But I've been a long time educator, been a teacher, had worked at the Department of Ed, have worked at Metro State. And so I've done a lot of work in education in the last 20 plus years. And in the recent years, and I do really believe that education is one of the ways for us to really understand our history, understand what is the world that we want to live in. How do we educate our next generation, right? Our students, to make sure that they are productive citizens. And a little bit about myself is that I was born in Hong Kong, grew up in Malaysia, and I've been here for almost 40 years. Or is it more than 40 years? I kind of lost count. I've been here for a long time. I've been here longer than anywhere else. And yet I always feel as if I'm, because of my accent, because, as Asian American, we're always kind of this perpetual forever foreigner. And we are always constantly having to work always harder and always fighting for our voice. So I'm on this panel partly like we say, right? This is a platform to be aware of what is going on and also know that Asian American is not a monolithic community. We all have different stories, we have different journey, we all have different experiences. There are 40 or more ethnic groups within the Asian American community. And we are very unique that way, with different religion, different practices, different ways that we got here. Some of us are born here, some of us immigrated here, some of us are refugee. And so to have a platform to have those multiple voices is very important. And I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you. Next, we have Kogena Pen from the Kren Organization of Minnesota.
My name is Kuge. So, like Grace says, I'm part of the Korean Organization of Minnesota as a Youth Korean Development Counselor. I just started, so I'm still the baby in the organization. So it's been 5 months working there. So first, thank you for having me. So I'm Korean. I'm multi-ethnic. I'm a refugee and an immigrant, and also an activist. But that journey is something that I'm still developing in. And then what brought me here and to be part of the panel is that I believe that changes comes with educating one another. And that comes with a conversation like what we're doing right now is well needed. And then that changes to engagement. And then that's when policy comes, right? That's when policy need to change. And when policy changes, there's also that next step, right? What is the next step? And that next step is working together and then engaging with one another. And I do believe that what is happening is real and it still continues. Yeah.
Thank you. So our first question I'd like to direct to Rose Chu. So Dr. Chu, since you are, or actually, in addition to serving on the Roseville School Board, you also work with MINEEP, which is Minnesota, oh, help me out.
Minnesota Education Equity Partnership.
Right. And so also through that work experience, why do you think there has been an increase in anti-Asian hate crimes during the pandemic?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think at the simplest way, we could have a whole hour just talking about that. The pandemic is not helping for sure, because this is very stressful time, right? Very stressful time for everybody. We have never experienced this in a long, long time. Many of us first time in this lifetime. That is not helping. And I do the work in racial equity, and we talk a lot about narratives. We talk about what narrative actually does to a community, like what are the messaging, and leadership matters. What leaders say matter, what words leaders use matter. And during the pandemic, the words that has been used about like the China virus, the Kung flu, all this, to me is very racist in the sense of associating something that is global to a country and to a people. And because the hate of Asian American actually is not like the first time ever this has happened. It has been historically happening because of the Chinese Exclusion Act or the Japanese internment camp, and Vincent Chin, who died in the 80s for just being him, being Japanese American, being Chinese American, mistaken to be Japanese American. Okay, so all that together means that when people think that the virus is really from China, whether it is or not, it doesn't matter because it's a global pandemic, that they are associating with people who might look like Chinese. And for most people, we all look about the same. So it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter whether you are born here, whether you have been here for 5 years, 50 years, or you just, it doesn't matter. That when they see that, the fear of like, you know what, you need to go home, right? We don't belong here because you are passing this virus to the rest of us. And it's painful to hear that. It's painful to hear leaders at the top level. It doesn't matter what party you're at. It is about leadership set the tone. We know that, right? In organizations, the CEO set the tone. In a district, our superintendent set the tone. In schools, the district sets the tone. When the tone is about, like, you know what, those people are the ones who brought the virus. That's the message, right? That's the underlying message, along with the long history that is rooted in racism for Asian American. That combination really is very, very painful and very stressful in terms of the fear base and the xenophobia about who we are, right? Not understanding our history as Asian Americans. So I'll stop there, but it's really, the rhetoric has not helped at all whatsoever. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you said earlier in your intro, we are all Asian Americans, but and oftentimes we're all just grouped in together, like we're all Asian, or you all look Chinese.
That's right. Right.
But then,
right.
So actually, we were somewhat conscious of trying to get a more diverse Asian panel. So, like, for example, I'm a Korean American, and then Dr. Chu, you said you were
I'm Chinese American and from Hong Kong.
And grew up a lot in Malaysia, right?
Yeah, and grew up in Malaysia. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Kuge, you said you're Korean, and then Vivi, I believe you're Vietnamese American.
That is correct. Yes.
Yep. And so we're all Asian Americans, but we also have our distinct communities that we come from. Yep. But so for our next question, I was wondering if we could all just kind of share either if you or anyone has personally experienced anti-Asian sentiment or discrimination because of your Asian ancestry. And so we'll start with Vivi, please.
Sure. I'd like to share a story. This happened before the pandemic, but like Dr. Chu was just saying, is that sometimes assumptions are already made. Yes. Even before people talk to us or before people get to know us. So I remember very vividly the time that I went into labor and gave birth to my second daughter, and about 8 years ago. And this just happened at Regent's Hospital. So very close to home. And it's not like it's 2 hours away. It's literally just down the road from where I'm at. And because of my Asian ancestry, I kept on getting asked whether I spoke English over and over again. And every time the nurses change their shifts, or every time an RN comes in, every time a nursing assistant comes in, the first question was, do you understand what I'm talking? Or do you understand me? Do you understand English? Do you speak English? And mind you, this is 2 a.m. in the morning and I'm trying to feed my little baby. The questions I got was, do you speak English? And for me, I tend to take those opportunities and not brush them off, but took the opportunities to educate. And I said, just because I look Asian, just because I look the way I look, I would appreciate not being asked those questions. And yes, I understand what you're talking about, but if you speak a little slower, I may be able to respond to you, because of the labor effect or because I'm on medications, whatever it is. And then it was like Grace mentioned, there are, Dr. Chu, you touched on this too. There are 40 different Asian ethnicities, and we're not all alike.
No.
Definitely not all alike at all. I was being mistaken for a Hmong descendant, sometimes Chinese, sometimes Filipino, sometimes Thai, which, okay, I get that. However, just being a human being, I would like being asked, like, where do you come from? That question in itself is discrimination, but however, it's better than being assumed that I was one ethnicity over another. So I was given what the hospital at the time called the Southeast Asian diet. And from the Southeast Asian community, after we give birth, there is no such thing as a Southeast Asian diet because every Asian community, or even like every ethnicity, every group of people have a way of bouncing back after labor, right after delivery. But I was given basically boiled chicken with broth, and that was, to me, the Southeast Asian diet. So I actually had to call in the RNs and the nursing manager and the nutritionist and basically 3 other people into the room and give them a little education on what Southeast Asian truly was. And I said, this is not a Southeast Asian diet. This is a Hmong typical diet, which is fine. I'd like to be offered that if you have it. However, please do not assume that I am Hmong just because I look like this. Do not assume that I don't speak English just because I look like this. And just do not assume at all. Ask the question. I will be happy to answer. And so that's my belief going from there, is that if you want to know, ask the question. Don't use your pre-assumptions of what you think you know. Like you said, just because the virus comes from China, it's a global pandemic. Everybody gets it. It doesn't necessarily narrows it down to a group of people. It's not like we're more likely to carry the virus. It's not like the Caucasians are more likely to carry the virus. It's not like the African Americans are more likely to carry the virus. Everyone, as a human being, has equal chance of carrying this virus because we are human. So I kind of like to leave it there. Just ask the questions, educate ourselves, learn something from this and not just assume, because assumption is deadly.
And real quick, just to add on that, I think just common basic etiquette, right? So I went to a parent-teacher conference, and so in the room was me, and then I was helping a youth and the vice principal. So the teacher comes into the room, doesn't even say hi at all. So she's assuming I'm the mother, which is fine. But she looks straight at the vice principal and says, does she speak English? So I was just like, common courtesy, at least say hello first, like, okay, at any rate, let's move on to Kuge. Have you or anyone ever experienced anti-Asian sentiment or discrimination because of your Asian ancestry?
Yes, definitely. I think all of us could have experiences. Is the phrase "go back to your country," right? That phrase, that's all of us, we get it. Especially, I get that when I was in middle school, right? And I was like, and I'm a refugee. Like, we were forced to get out of our country, right? We're being oppressed to get out of our country. So to answer that question, I cannot, because there is no home. So there's no such as like a country. I cannot go back to my country. So I think that reality hit is huge. And also with going back to the assumptions, right? The negative connotations that we receive as an Asian, and also as a youth and young adult, is that we need to prove that we're the best. And then that could be external, and that could also be internal. And I am experiencing it right now at this age, right? People assume that, hey, if you're Asian, you're smart. You can do better. You're better than other race. And those things doesn't really speak to your face, but it's something that internalized, like something that we're taught, right? That's what we grew up hearing, grew up being seen, and also being taught. I think that's something that's huge. I would say that like even though we're Asian, the face of like we're not good at math. There's 1,000 who's good at math. And there's a variety of assumption that we perceive from one another, not just like the outer communities, but it's also within our Asian community, right? Our Southeast Asian communities, the assumption that we have towards one another. I think for me, what I'm trying to say is that like educate yourself. If you have questions regarding a person, it's just ask the name, and then be honest about it. Like, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Like, how do you pronounce your names? Like those things is very simple, but sometimes it could be hard for some people. I think, anyhow, that's how you're able to get to know somebody, right? Is like asking name, like but not as but the sh though. Just kidding. It's like, yeah, like ask my name, like get to know me, and I will love to share about me. But don't assume. Well, I think people can assume, but like don't act it out, right? Like don't act it out and being like ignorant about it, because you cannot really control how people assume you or judge you. So yeah.
Okay, and Dr. Chu, have you
Yeah.
or anyone you know experienced any discrimination or anti-Asian sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many. Oh my goodness. I mean, we have to laugh about this, right? It's just, sometimes it can be painful talking about this too. I would say sometimes being Chinese American, the fact that I am Chinese comes with a lot of assumptions. So assumption is a key, right? Because of the stereotype, people think that, oh, you must have come as somebody rich, as somebody who own like things. And so I say, oh no, I come from very humble beginning. That's one. The language is a big one because I speak with the accent. It's almost as if it's an assumption that because I speak with an accent, sometimes it means that I don't know English very well, or I'm not educated, or that people want to avoid talking to me because they don't quite know what to do, because they're afraid that they don't know how to communicate with me. I'm going, hello. I mean, it's like I actually am quite educated, and I think another thing that that I have really experienced is that, especially as Asian women, I think there's an assumption that we are a certain way, right? If we are vocal, it feels as if somehow like you don't fit the stereotype, right? Or that somehow you are seen as somebody who's hardworking, you get the work done. And there's a lot of talk about that, the kind of bamboo ceiling, idea that somehow as a leader, people don't see you as a leader. And I was just with a group of Asian American educators, and many of them felt that. They have experienced it, where like, I did all this, so why is it that I wasn't chosen for a certain leadership position or leadership role to lead a training or to do something? And there's an assumption that like, oh, we don't know whether you'll be comfortable. I'm like, you make that assumption about us that you wouldn't make about other people. So those stereotypes about Asian Americans, especially women, are very damaging. That means they don't really know us, know what we can contribute, the talents that we have. And the fact is that we are not the docile, right? We are not the docile Asian American women in terms of images that you see in limited shows and stories out there. Okay, we are very invisible that way. And that's the reason a platform like that allows us to have that voice to say, yes, we have many stories. We are strong, we are leaders, and we contribute to this society.
And real quick, so what Dr. Chu was referring to, the bamboo ceiling. So you've heard of in like corporate America, the glass ceiling. So
yeah.
like women can only get so far because there's a glass ceiling. So the bamboo ceiling is referring to kind of like a barrier that Asians face in the corporate ladder, so to speak. Okay, but moving on. Some news outlets have reported that Asian-owned businesses have seen an increase in vandalism or loss of patrons due to anti-Asian sentiment during the pandemic. So, Vivi, as a small business owner of Teacup, which sells boba or bubble tea, which is a popular Asian drink, has your business experienced any of this?
Thank you, Grace. This is actually a really great question. And for us, we have been fortunate that we have not experienced much of this vandalism or so say. And this is why I want to say that, because we live in Roseville, and Roseville has been such a wonderful, embracing city for for throughout the pandemic, that I do have to kind of like commend Roseville in handling this, because I remember during the first few days of the riot, due to the death of George Floyd, there was rioting and looting, especially the first, I think, like few days. We had a group of people, and we like as the owner of Teacup, I didn't realize this. We actually saw this on camera. There was a group of people that drove around to all of the community-owned businesses and put up posters that says community-owned businesses, like just right in front of our glass windows, and multiple posters and multiple signs, just right outside, like helping us protect our business. That that brought tears to my eyes, because I mean, at that time, with the pandemic and with everything that's going on, we're just kind of at a loss, like everybody else was, not knowing and not sure what to do. And there were this group of people that just drove around and put up posters everywhere, protecting the business, like protecting their city and community and their homes. Now I know that, like reading the news and understanding what's happening out there, I know this does not happen across the country. This does not happen across the state. Even like in some cities, for example, I've had friends whose business have been broken into. I have I know people in the nail business with salons that are right on University Avenue, just maybe a few miles from my shop, that were broken into. I know grocery stores affiliated with the families. I mean, there are tons and tons of businesses out there that I know personally that got broken into, but for some reason, ours did not get hit. And I'm not saying come hit us, please don't. I'm trying to say is, it's like our community came together, and that's how we avoided all of this. And I think that's important to bring up, is that if we as a community, if we can stand up against something, we can make that change. We can be the initiation of that change and be the start of all of, of something good. And I wish that was the case throughout the country, but it starts somewhere, and I'm glad that it started with us.
That's awesome. Next question is for Kuge. So you work for the Kren Organization of Minnesota. So for those joining today's program who are not familiar with the Kren people, they are an ethnic group out of Burma or Myanmar. Many Kren people were forced from their homes due to oppression and military terrorism, and started coming to the US in 2004 by way of refugee camps in Thailand. Today, Minnesota is home to one of the largest Karen communities in America. Kuge, it is believed that a number of anti-Asian hate crimes have gone unreported. In your experience with KOM clients, do you have many experienced anti-Asian hate and discrimination but not reported? And if so, why do you think it's going unreported?
Firstly, it is not going unreported because of the language barrier. There's also that cultural taboo of like, like if something happened to you and it's not near death, well, like it's okay, right? Let's put it aside. That that kind of mentality also is the lack of self-efficacy that we're seeing, and also the fear of the police. They can also be part of it, and how the police system is working. Also, right now with everything that's going on, right, with the like the Karen people, right now as we're talking, there are over 20,000 Karen are under IDPs in Myanmar while they're running from the Burmese military called Samadon. I think there's a lot on our shoulder, right? We're already carrying so much traumas, also so much pains, um, regarding the families are still in Burma and running, and also experience that Asian hate crime here. I think there is a lot of recurring trauma, and also the trauma, the past trauma that we haven't healing yet, right? But there's another trauma that comes in. I think also that fear, right? That the sense of not feeling safe, the sense of like being like, I think many are willing to express this, but they don't know how it works and um how the police system works. But I do believe that a big part of it is again like the language barrier, and also um the long process of like how to get the leader system like to be appointed. I think that's huge. And also that the cost of money, the lacking of like the lacking of the legal like the systems. I think with that part, our community needed to do better. I think, and then another thing is that um, many are many prefer not to report. Um, it's just because how do I say it's just because of like again bringing the aspect of that trauma, and also the the numb that has already developing for many of the Korean people. But I do hope that if the Korean people are watching right now, I do hope that like you're not going to be afraid. If there are um, people out there who's willing to support you if you're experiencing violence, and then we're here for you. So yeah.
Next question is for Dr. Chu. So according to 2021 enrollment data, Roseville Public School District's largest non-white racial group is Asians at 19%, followed by Black or African Americans at 18%, Latinos 15%, multiracial students at 8%. So we do have a fairly diverse school district. But Dr. Chu, has there been a rise in anti-Asian hate within Roseville Public Schools? And how has the schools been educating students and staff on anti-Asian hate?
Yeah, from what we know, and I really talked to district leaders about this, and they are not hearing it directly, but that doesn't mean it's not happening, right? Because for some of the reason that Kuge are talking about, sometimes people don't want to talk about it. They don't know how. They don't know how, they might, sometimes we think that we personalize it and don't think that it is not a big deal, right? That kind of thing. So it doesn't mean that it may not happen. However, I would say that I'm very proud of some of the things that Roseville is doing to address that, especially when the Atlanta shooting happened very swiftly. We had messages from the superintendent to the whole staff and to the community to make sure that people know the resources, like the staff and the teachers know the resources that are available, and teachers are talking among themselves around lessons, especially around social emotional health of some of our students. Our Asian liaison and also African American liaison. I mean, I always think about how this has been through the pandemic, the racial uprising is really hitting two intersecting communities, right? From a racial justice standpoint. And so sometimes some of these things have to be done in tandem so that students know that our liberation is tied up with each other. Is very clear about that. And so so there's been a lot of resources like that. There's been a lot of circle talks for healing to make sure that people have a chance to process. The liaisons have been calling families when this first happened because of the relationship they have with many of the Asian American families to check on them, to make sure that they are okay. What is interesting too is that even before the Atlanta shooting, last April, as we are hearing about the anti-Asian sentiment, as a board, we created a board resolution to really condemn anti-Asian hate and to really make a statement, right? A strong statement about supporting our Asian American students, families, and staff. And I was very touched because for me, that's again, like we talk about the tone that we're setting, right? Mm-hmm. That we really wanted to make a statement to say that this is not welcome in the Roseville area schools. And I'm was very touched by fellow board members who wanted to do this, and really appreciate district leadership to help craft that together to make sure that this is a public statement that we can make. And the final thing I'll say is that we had some data that was about distant learning. Yes. What has been interesting is that families have a choice, right? During the pandemic, families have a choice as we slowly reopen. What is interesting, and I don't think we are alone in this, many districts are probably facing this, the percentage of families who choose more in-person or hybrid learning are more the white families, and then more of the families of color are choosing online. Okay, some are choosing in the blended, but in terms of percentage, it's a very interesting percentage. Yeah. And when we look at the desegregated data, Asian American families in Roseville, half of them chose to be almost half of them chose to be online. Now we don't know whether this has something to do with the hate, but I do know, based on my conversation with some of the educators I've talked to, whether in Roseville, in other places, and other members, including myself, we live in this fear, right? Okay, when it will be my turn where I'm going to experience this? Is that at a walk? Is it at the store? Is it in the parking lot? You just never know, right? So I do think that there is a little bit of that fear that may be driving that, plus other issues that are very cultural, right? In terms of who's taking care of family because of the pandemic. So I think those two factors together make that percent really high compared to other groups.
That's interesting because we live in Roseville, but we live in that little pocket of Roseville that feeds into Mounds View School District. So my daughter actually goes to high school in Mounds View District, and she chose the all online option, but she did say most of the other online students in her classes are Asian. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was really interesting.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, not surprised.
Yes, because we chose distant learning for our kids as well.
Yeah,
for the year. Yeah. It's a little bit of everything, and I guess one of the biggest factors is, regardless of what this virus is called, we are more worried about catching the virus than anyone else. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, to put it lightly, it's not like we don't want this virus. We don't want it here. We don't want this pandemic to happen. And we are going to be doing everything we can to keep our kids from catching it, to keep us from catching it, to keep the people around us from catching it. So then at the end of the day, that's our main mentality. So our main goal is to stop this cycle of people catching it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So,
I think what is interesting, what you say is that there's been a lot of conversation around how we respond to the pandemic, like how different groups respond to the pandemic. And I do think that there is, I'm generalizing, but, coming from an Asian American culture, from an Eastern culture, there is the sense of collective that is bigger than sometimes the sense of individualism in America, in the American culture.
Sure.
That many of us have had those conversations, that the way we are responding and how we are viewing what we need to do as individuals and what we need to do as public health concern are sometimes different.
Sure, I think
because of that, right? That
Yeah.
Eastern culture versus the Western culture. Yeah.
Yep, I think that you see that kind of Western or American individualism when it's like, when you hear individuals talk about like their rights not to have to wear a mask.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in Asian cultures, it is definitely more communal and collective, and like you wear a mask not just for yourself, but like for the community and to help the community. But moving on, so according to a new report from the Pew Research Center, Asian Americans are the fastest growing racial or ethnic group in the United States. So what can we as Asian Americans do to fight discrimination? And we'll start with Vivi.
I think it's a great question. And really what it is that I believe the way to fight racial discrimination of any sort is really just to begin with education. And not only that, but to begin with getting community members involved, getting friends and getting people to be on your cause. And really what I mean by that is I am very vocal about being Asian American. I'm very vocal about my Asian side. I'm very vocal about, I take pride in not doing the same thing as my Caucasian counterparts. I take pride of having two different identities, two different cultures. I take pride of celebrating, like, for example, I'm Buddhist. I take pride in celebrating Buddhist birthdays. I take pride in celebrating the Lunar New Year. I mean, I for sure take pride in every single Asian holidays that I participated in. And I want to make sure that other people, especially my Caucasian counterparts, know what that's like and participate in those events as well. Not because I want to say, well, here, look at me. This is all the cool things I do. But really it's that, hey, there's a whole world out there that you guys may not know. And it's happening right next door to you. Like there's a temple right on 36 and Dale. And we do events all the time. Like come and join us, learn about what we do. Like don't be afraid of it. There's no, like that fear that you have for the unknown or the assumption that, they may be doing something wonky and I don't know what it is. Like, I think for us, it takes people from inside this community, the Asian community, to reach out and say, come join us and come learn about us. Like we're different and this is why we're different. Not just, hey, we're different, just accept it.
Like just get to know us.
Just get to know us.
Yeah,
and
sure.
We are wonderful in many, many ways. And just because, like Dr. Chu said, just because we're women, just because we come from Asian descent, that does not mean we don't have anything to contribute. As a matter of fact, vocal Asian women has the most to contribute. It's because we're not afraid to share it.
Yes.
Next, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I guess I will leave it there. But in all honesty, it's just we do the best we can, and we take our personality, and introduce it to the world. And if the world, when the world accepts it, they'll realize that, oh yeah, it's not as intimidating as it looks or as it sounds.
Kuge,
Yeah.
what can we as Asian Americans do to not just fight discrimination, but I guess help bring understanding?
Yeah, it's like, first of all, is not being afraid to organize, not being afraid to invite. And when we invite, who are we inviting is very important, right? Um, who is going to be in the table? Like, are they just all riches? Are they just like Chinese, Japanese? But like bring that culture, right? Because like we said again, there is so many cultures within Southeast Asian or in Asian in particular. There's different diverse ethnicities, faith, and then culture, and then languages. I think as the Asian, we value community, right? That collective work. So let's do it. I think I was I was I am like very happy, very grateful that I was invited to many spaces. Such as this space that we're having right now is really great. And then I hope that we continue to invite more. And we need meals. There's no meals in here, but we understand why there's no meals in here, right? There's a lot of issues is related to Asian women and elders and adults. So I think invites and not being afraid to approach one another. Um, let's not put each other on the side, because as we know, we tend to be on the side. So for whoever is an extrovert, whoever is in leadership position, like take that privilege, right? Take that honor to bring the community together. And then for outsiders, well, I don't want to call outsider, but like for our friends, right? For our non-Asian friends, for our non-Southeast Asian friends, I think like Vivi said, it's kind of like, come in, we'll welcome you, but then coming with respect and then coming with open-minded. I think that's very important. Like, don't, of course, you come with your judgment, right? But make sure that judgment is welcoming and also respectful. Like again, like you cannot judge the way that people judge you because their upbringing is different. And then another thing is that when we talk about leadership, right, who is welcome in that table is not just the conversation that we have in our just the Southeast Asian, but also the non-Asian is like, so in your table, right, in your decision making, when policy changes, who are welcome at that table. I think I want to bring in that aspect of leaders, right? Like Miss Rose said, like if you're a leader, you tone the environment, you tone, and then you carry. So make sure that if you're in a leadership position, make sure that you are trying to represent and be inclusion in what you carry, right? I think that's huge. I think we need to do a lot. We need to do a lot if you call yourself a leader. I think we need to do a lot and act a lot, and I appreciate those who continues to do so, and I'm really thankful. For those who are just laying back, let's wake up. It's time to wake up, right? It's time to wake up and do something about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Dr. Chu, what can we as Asian Americans do?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I love the idea of that we have to be confident, right? We have the confidence of who we are. We should not be apologetic whatsoever about the cultures that we bring, the language that we speak, and everything that makes us who we are. And the fact that we are amazing people to be able to code switch between our culture and the dominant culture in America, that's a gift. It's not a deficit. It's a gift to the community. So we need to embrace that. So, I'm also Buddhist. So the idea of inside change to outside change. So the other thing that I think we need to do too is to think along the line. That's the work that I do. I work in the intersection of racial equity and education equity. And I'm always very interested in the intersectionality of the various communities of color, our experiences, our history, right? Our current and our current sufferings, our current pain, our current contributions, because this is not a race to say who suffer more. It is
Right.
about the fact that in America we are the fabric of this country, right? We're the fabric of this country. More than 50% of our students are students of color as a country. We cannot ignore the demographic change. Let's embrace that. Let us embrace what that means for the future of this country. And so that's the work that we need to think about. And then I think about then what the system change look like then, right? It's one thing to think about individuals, but we also need to think about what the system change look like. And system change for me, one of the aspects is about relationships, and we have covered that. We've talked about how we need to work with others who may not be like us, work with others that have other cultures, right? And then also look at systems and policies. How are the systems aggregating all the data together instead of like really disaggregating data so that we actually understand who are we actually serving and where are the resources going? That kind of more nuanced analysis and understanding of our community is absolutely necessary. So that and then the last one is what we've talked about. People make assumptions, all the stereotypes that we have. It's about the mental model of what people have about Asian American that has been ingrained for many, many, many years. And how do we interrupt that? I think, the way we talk about, right? Being organizing, let's stand up. Let's, show other folks that there is a whole world out there. There are other holidays, there are other religion. That's one way to interrupt those, the more modern minority myth and all those stereotypes of who we are. And so that's the beginning of how we can make those changes to advance a society that is really for everyone, and for our Asian Americans to thrive.
And as Asians are the fastest growing racial group in the US, I would also like to encourage young people to register to vote, because we are becoming a major voting bloc. And I believe so in Georgia, Biden barely won Georgia, and they do believe it's in large part due to the growing number of Asian voters in Georgia. And in other states where the Asian vote has largely increased, a lot of states have flipped. So, we're becoming a major political power as well. And so I just encourage Asian young people and people who haven't registered to vote yet to just get involved. And then also real quick before we move on, just as far as fighting discrimination, I wanted to give a plug for the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. If you do know of something that happens to someone or something happens to yourself, you can report it on the Minnesota Department of Human Rights website. And on their website, there's a form you can fill out. There's also a hotline phone number you can call to report incidents. So we only have a few more minutes left in our panel tonight. So I wanted to just give each of you any last closing remarks you would like to make, any other ideas that allies or non-Asians might be able to do to support the AAPI or Asian American Pacific Islander community. So we'll start with Vivi.
Thank you. I can't believe an hour has passed already, but here I am sitting and thinking about everything that's being said in the last hour. I'm really, and I like to bring it back to, yes, change starts with the individual, and then it moves on to the community, and then it moves to systematic change. But it has to start somewhere. And I think the biggest part is for all of us to come together to create that change. And I think it's only when we come together and accept accept that we are different in one way or another, and accepting those differences and move on and get on to the next stage. And then just America is the blended society. It's always been a melting pot of something. And so let's just be acceptance of everyone's background And it doesn't matter what it is. I think the more that we can learn to do that, the better we are at getting to that systematic change, to one day to get there. And I'm hoping that we're a lot closer today than we were a year ago or 2 years ago. But kind of bringing it back to Roseville, just being a citizen of the city of Roseville, I feel like we are a little further advanced than some of our surrounding cities, and especially some of our surrounding states. And that's a big plus. Like, we don't want to talk about all of the negatives and never mention the positives. And this is for us one of the many positives. Okay. So, way to go, Roseville. And, kudos to all the strong women, especially women of Asian descent out there. Because I know I know we are not quiet.
Dr. Chu, we have a few minutes left.
Yes.
I mean, your question, if I think about, racism didn't start with Asian Americans or people of color, right? So how do we build allyship? How do we build our white allies and colleagues to be conspirators so that they can actually stand up along with us to fight racism? And one of the ways, especially from an Asian American community standpoint, is to see us and really know us, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like what we talk, don't assume anything. Ask, learn, right? Get to know us as humans, and know our history. I think oftentimes too often we don't know our own history. And really understand that this just didn't happen overnight. There's a long history of what got us here. And there's some current history that we need to understand as things change. What is it that we need to do to really embrace that history? Like you say, embrace those differences and embrace that at the human level, we are the same, right?
Yes.
There's no one group that is more superior than another. We are at the level of humanity. We are the same. And so how do we see each other for that? And really lift each other's voices, and like Kuge say, right? That make sure that we are at the table. Like, hello, don't make us so invisible. We are here. We've been here, right? We've been here. Like, include us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Kuge.
So I always remind myself with these, whatever I do is walk the talk. As we're talking, we need to walk it. And also another thing is, it is our Heritage Month, right?
Yes.
So let's celebrate each other's culture, each other's differences, and also similarities. And then another thing is that while we're refilling, while recharging our loved ones in our communities, let's not forget to recharge ourselves and to fill our self-cup. Teacups. let's not forget to fill ourselves. Like, we need to recharge, right?
Yes.
That is something I'm also reminding myself, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of healing that we need in our community. And then let's continue to take care of each other's, and then yourself.
Love it.
So yeah.
And as Kuge mentioned, as we close, I would like to acknowledge that May is Asian American and Pacific Islander, or AAPI Heritage Month, which recognizes the contributions and influence of AAPIs to the history, culture, and achievements of the United States. So I'd like to just also close thanking each one of you for taking the time to join us tonight, to engage and share your experience and insights with us. And thank you all for your contributions to making the city of Roseville a better place for all of us. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.